Chapter 4. With a tremendous roar, the metal bird lifted into the air. The private cargo carrier for Technisar gained altitude and cut through the sky. Stefan sat in the small row of seats with the other two passengers. The enclosed area, separate from the cargo hold, was pressurized but not insulated against the overwhelming sound during takeoff. The others had small pieces of contoured foam wedged into their ears, but Stefan sat with open ears, smiling. The volume of moving molecules vibrating around him was a pleasant break from the sounds he had begun hearing in the last 3 days. Upon learning about the death of his psychiatrist, Stefan was shocked and strangely relieved, as he had been severely agitated when he could not get any word from the doctor's office, which was closed when he arrived for his appointment. He started to feel nervous and began splitting his pills, taking half the recommended dose. When he did learn that the doctor had been shot to death, and all the sordid details surrounding the tragedy, he felt that his own problems were put into a perspective that differed from what he had previously had. He decided that he could live without his meds, or that he would at least try. 8 days after he left Clara's apartment for the final time, he rode the plane towards Phoenix. 3 days earlier, his body had metabolized the last of the antipsychotic medication, and a strange hum was in his ears. He kept his composure and ignored the sound, but it was present constantly. And so now, the sound of the plane lifting into the air, the voluminous engines reaching decibels that would be uncomfortable for others to hear, was a welcomed occurrence for Stefan, because for a few moments he could not hear the hum in the slightest. He also had not been sleeping well in the last 3 days, as strange visions were lighted within the backdrop of his mind. These images of energies flowing about through and from everything he could see were growing brighter and brighter, waking him up after a little sleep. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the sound of the engine dropped, but was coupled with the rush of air on the fuselage. Such physical realities drowned out his inner senses as they were, and within minutes of takeoff he nodded his head forward and fell into a deep sleep. His inner senses, finding no conscious guardian of his mind, lurched forward and toyed with his being. Wit and will would be of no avail, as a dream can be free from the confines of logic, and the whispers he could know were spoken with a voice other than his own. But not a voice or volume of choice, these whispers, not a close voice speaking softly, rather a distant voice whose power is lessened by the great distance traversed. The words were not of what he knew, but vibrated a feeling. A language not of symbols, but of truth. These feelings grew, and he tasted metal and sweet water, a defiant sensation of a reality he was within by choice of circumstance. He was told to listen and speak, to write and read, to play and observe, to give and accept, to see with no regard and passionately give heed to the dispassionate removal of all that could be. "We are," he said, and felt in tandem with the resounding voice. "We are. We become. And we destroy." "No," he decried, "death not, and no destruction." It was not his voice, but his words, and he waited for a response. "We become," was the answer. His body rocked with a turbulent shimmer, and his mind thrust his awareness into reality. Waking with the jolt, it was a split second for him to recall where he was. The plane was bouncing through the air in a way that could not have been intended by the pilots. The two other passengers were gripping the seat firmly, and he did the same. "What is happening?" he yelled. One face was frozen in fear. The other yelled back, "We don't know. We should ask the captain." All three sat motionless, their thoughts jumbled by the trembling plane, staving off the terror that would mount if any of them admitted to this being a crash situation. With the determination to do more than sit in fear, Stefan unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. "I'll find out." In mid-sentence, the turbulence stopped. He stood with much more stability and began walking to the flight deck. The pilot and co-pilot were at the controls, each seriously shaken and sweating. Looking over his shoulder, the pilot answered Stefan's question before he could ask it. "I'm not sure yet, but it felt like we had a decompression from the cargo hold," he said. "We've begun our initial descent. We will land in 20 minutes. If there is a gash in the plane, we may have lost some cargo." "What could have caused a gash in the plane?" Stefan's voice was shaky. "Equipment failure," the co-pilot said. "One loose bolt or one rusted panel could have given way. We won't know until we land." There was a relative silence in the flight deck. "How do you know there aren't other loose bolts or panels?" Stefan asked. The pilot looked at him. "We don't. So we're going to bring the speed down and lower our altitude, keep our pitch as even as we can, and hope for the best." "We're on a wing and a prayer?" Stefan asked. "Still got both wings," the pilot said. "We should be fine." "I'll go tell the others," Stefan said, feeling none too comforted by the information he would bring back from the flight deck. 20 minutes seemed a long time as every slight bump or jolt caused waves of near panic to set in among the three passengers. They tried the distraction of conversation and talked about very insignificant information at first. The latest popular song, what actress left her husband, what sports star was likely to receive what award. A strong bounce of the plane brought silence and prompted one of the passengers to state he wouldn't want his last conversation to be about such things. They spoke of themselves, where they were born and had gone to school, if they were married, and what they were doing for the company that put them on the plane. Stefan brought up that he was about to go on vacation, starting in Sedona, and Phil, a Seminole from Florida originally, told him that he would love it there, even suggested a psychic coach named Nikki Bianco Rendice, who he had gone to years ago. He claimed that she predicted he would meet his wife and even the genders of his two kids. Did she predict anything about dying in a plane crash? Nope, not at all. Then when we land, I'll see if she's still in the area. After that, the mood lifted, as a modicum of certainty accompanied their hope for survival. Minutes passed, and soon enough they landed safely at Sky Harbor Airport. Once off the plane, they all looked at the gash. A panel had not fallen away, and all the bolts were intact. One sheet of metal bent outward, warped by some great exerted force from the interior. They all stood staring at the long hole. The mechanic walked up behind them, took one look, and said, "Whoa, what happened here?"